Hello everyone! Today in this video we will fight against the atmos character of our world around us, and today we will try to discuss this all green madness that takes place mainly in European countries, European Union countries I would say. Not only there, but mainly on the western part of European continent. Some countries try to negotiate, of course in a smart way, their own treaties, status and conditions, because there are such recommendations, I would say even orders from the European commissaries that cars, vehicles that use the fossil fuels will not be registered in European Union after 2035 AD. What a case of hubris, because no one knows what will happen in next 12 years. And there is also another regulation that houses that are not equipped within a proper heating and air circulation and other systems that for instance prevent moistures to get in, if not the systems that are recommended by officials. So they are of course called ecologically friendly, but it's not the case in fact, because for these cars and pseudo cars, I would say electric cars, because there is huge push in motorization, and these heating systems or the systems of equipping houses will be produced by certain companies that already had signed contracts with corrupted governments, European Union politicians, and everything circles within the same bowl. So we see that now European Union, as almost all parliamentary and democratic structure, became a institution that facilitates business for big companies that are producing things that population doesn't need, and these companies of course are gaining their influence on politicians thanks to, it's a nice word, lobbying, that in official newspeak replaced word corrupting. So now we see that all of this hysteria against CO2, decreasing CO2, electric cars, that they are self-combusting one after another really quickly, so there is a lot of release of not only CO2 but many more harmful substances, contaminations, but no one cares about it, because the business of us politicians and managers of big corporations is the most important. As we know, we don't count and environment doesn't count. Why is there a push for such electric cars? Because European motor industry is no longer so competitive with respect to American, Asian or even African motor industry, because Ethiopia has its own car already. So to rescue the market, these guys of course think like typical socialists and big corporations, like socialistic governments, as I was telling to you many times, because they are introducing regulations giving the monopoly to one or two companies for entire market in the countries where the socialists have power. And there is such plan that electric cars will be sold in Europe, because European citizens will be forced to buy it, and the cars using fossil fuels of course will be sold outside, because if someone wants to buy European brand, of course there will be still a production to export outside, but at least now the European motor industry that really feels the competition from the external world wants to secure for itself, at least this is the plan, European market by forcing by regulations, pseudo-ecological regulations, Europeans to buy electric cars. Of course it will not work, like all such massive and socialistic regulations. And another thing is that no one will be able to rent or buy a house that will not fulfill some, again, pseudo-ecological criteria, as I mentioned. Like house will be required to have this and this ventilation system, this and this heating system, and this way of making it sealed, not to allow moisture to get in. So we see that it's not for environment, it's just for great business for the companies that are associated with some group of politicians in national governments and European Union structures that are self-corrupted. I mean these managers of these companies, owners of these companies as well, and these politicians from these two levels of structures I mentioned. So we see that there is nothing about environment, it's all about business and securing the markets, at least European one for these companies and these politicians. Because European economy, due to the situation that we have in European countries, welfare state failed, production is actually more and more expensive, demographical and economical situation is not improving, there are many pensioners and people who enjoy the welfare state, so do not work and do not want to work, so they are a sort of support for the system, for the elections and for the street fights if needed. Here I refer to one of my previous movie where I was telling about provoking conflict, creating a group of beneficiaries, people who benefit from the social welfare, like many immigrants or the margin layer of the local population that enjoys social welfare for doing nothing, but government of course is teaching them with propaganda that of course they cannot achieve much because the bad majority doesn't allow them and blah 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 blah. And once there is a problem, the ones who rule the European countries hope that these people will be the first line of defense against the angry majority that will turn against the government. So there are many pensionaries and beneficiaries of the system to be given money and goods for living. That's why this is one of the reasons, and also population collapse, why the European economies are not so competitive anymore on the global market. That's why the socialistic governments and the big European corporations want to force Europeans by regulations, like for this electric pseudo cars and this equipment of the houses, heating and ventilation and ceiling system. Otherwise, if one doesn't have it, you are not able to sell the house and rent the house. So there is a plan in the 2030s to force people to buy the products of the companies that made a deal with European Union and national politicians. It's only all about it. It's only to rob the pockets of Europeans as much as possible in the name of clean environment and crusade against CO2. And we know that Europe is not the largest producer. European countries do not have the highest emission of CO2. Of course, the highest emission of CO2 have China, United States, Russia, India, but no one, and Indonesia, no one will say anything to these countries, of course, because they are doing what they want, which is normal. But in European countries, always there is always a need for ideology to explain people why the government is robbing their pockets. This is all about it. And there is also another issue that actually we don't know what's the human contribution to the global emission of CO2, which that is blamed for all climatic evolutions we observe and were observing for many decades. So we don't know what's the real impact of CO2 itself, and we don't know what's the real fraction of the CO2 produced by human activity, and what's the real fraction produced by geological process like volcano eruptions. But there are papers by serious geologists that prove that maybe human contribution to the CO2 emission globally is maybe 5 or 6%. So even if we take China, India, US, Europe, all world, we don't have much to contribute in the CO2 emission, and this is not the only gas that affects our climate equilibrium. So we see that all of these things have no scientific basis, like with this all hysteria we had for last 3 years with this small Chinese friend, this dangerous microbe, so called. So we see that there is no scientific base, it's only ideologically motivated and financially motivated by people who want to cash on it, so politicians and managers of corporations that want to force people to buy their products. This is what I wanted to say, and this is what I wanted to to this is what I wanted to say, to make you look in a proper direction. And of course, as people, we need to be aware of this what's happening and oppose this madness at any time, and always look at the hands of the people who have power and oppose when another madhouse is coming. All the best, have a nice day, bye.